Towards the end of the war, and immediately following, talks began in earnest regarding Europe's post-war reorganization. Stalin proved to be a competent and formidable negotiator, despite these conferences being his first appearance on the world stage. The British Foreign Secretary, Anthony Eden, noted, "Marshal Stalin as a negotiator was the toughest proposition of all. Indeed, after something like 30 years' experience of international conferences of one kind and another, if I had to pick a team for going into a conference room, Stalin would be my first choice. Of course the man was ruthless, and of course he knew his purpose. He never wasted a word. He never stormed. He was seldom even irritated." At the conference at Yalta in February of 1945, Stalin demanded a Soviet political sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. After resistance by Churchill and Roosevelt, Stalin promised that the government's primary task regarding Poland would be to prepare elections. The parties at Yalta further agreed that countries of liberated Europe and former Axis satellites would be allowed to create democratic institutions of their own choice. Stalin would renege on both agreements. Fraudulent Polish elections held in January of 1947 resulted in Poland's official transformation into a communist state by 1949.
Behind the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe, Russia's authority is unchallenged in countries like once proud Poland, where the Soviet technique of conquest put a communist regime into power and then stamped out all opposition. Poland's army, once largely anti-communist, was taken over by the new regime, and along with German prisoners was marched off to the task of clearing up the ruins of war. Under Soviet rule, Poland, still dazed from the destruction it suffered during the war, has little hope for the future. Helpless victims of Russia's world ambitions, the Polish people are today struggling against tremendous odds for the chance to live.
Furthermore, at the Potsdam Conference in the summer of 1945, Stalin refused to remove his military from occupied countries in Eastern Europe, despite the fact that Germany had surrendered months earlier. By this time it had become clear to Clement Attlee, the newly appointed British Prime Minister, and Harry S. Truman, who replaced Franklin Roosevelt as U.S. President, that Stalin was adamant about controlling all the territory he gained throughout the war. By July of 1945, Stalin's forces effectively controlled the Baltic States, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. Refugees fled these countries out of fear of a communist takeover.
But clear in the record of Russia's post-war years is the long and calculated series of moves which have made the Soviet Union the #1 menace to the peace of the world. Russia's leaders, bent on one goal, world domination, are moving with single-minded purpose toward that goal. Implacably opposed to America's economic system, Russia faces the United States across a world which is shrinking fast. Swiftly and firmly, she has now expanded her sphere of influence to an area which covers half the earth. Her tactics range from infiltration to overthrow of the governments in power. But everywhere she penetrates, the result sought is exactly the same: